Hello there, my 32 subscribers. Well, I hope this finds you well, and if you're new to the channel, welcome to the channel. A while ago, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine about the current situation of the African continent, and I can't help but mention something in particular that has led to the production of this particular video essay. Well, we were talking about how Africa imports things. It's like the biggest market of these big companies in China, in UK and in USA, and we don't have much to offer to the outside world. Okay, to cut the story short, he said that our languages aren't also ours. Like we don't have a Kenyan language that we would call our own and be proud and say that this is our own. Well, to be fair, I do understand why someone would take such kind of a position, especially for their own country, for showing a lack of patriotism and appreciation of the little things that we do have going on around here, especially something like language. According to one of the most prominent writers in Kenyan literature, Professor Ngugi Wa Thiong'o, he says that language is the embodiment of the values and experiences that a culture has accumulated over the years of the culture's itself existence. And this is something that is very important to take note because it has it is one of the main things that the colonizers knew when they colonized a country. I'm saying this because I want to explain why I think someone would be in such kind of a situation of lacking a certain form of self-esteem about the nature of their country. I'm going to give you a little history about my experiences and most of Kenyans' experience before and after entering the education system to make a point about imperialism that is very deeply seated in our minds and psychologies. When we were young before entering the education system, we used to learn a lot about the cultures of our ancestors. So we used to be told stories about the hares and the hyena, where the hare was the cunning one and hyena was the greedy one. And hare was mostly the favorite of everyone because sometimes he would even outsmart the biggest animals in the animal kingdom, like the elephant. We would learn all sorts of lessons from these stories, and these were part of our cultures. This is what African tradition has always been. It was always about oral tradition, passing stories down from the older ones to the young ones. Then came the education system, and you are required to go through perhaps the 844 system that was introduced back in the late 1900s. And the funny thing about the education system is that you are not allowed to speak any form of mother tongues in the ground of schools, whether you are a Kikuyu or a Kamba or a Turkana or name your tribe. And you are forced to speak in this language that was dominating everywhere, which is the English language. Being told that you should not speak your mother tongue, being shamed for speaking in mother tongue, and also shamed for not being fluent and not speaking in this English language. This had an immense consequence to the African mind and to the mind of the colonized, not only in Africa, but in Latin America, in Asia, everywhere. You see, if you become alienated from your mother culture or your mother tongue, in other terms, you become alienated from who you are as a person. Since language is the embodiment of the values of your ancestors and the experiences they have gone through, then that means not connecting with your mother tongue automatically means that you don't have a concrete grounding on who you are as a person. So this means it became easier for let's say the British, because they are the one that colonized Kenya, it became easier for them to control our minds since our ancestors' minds didn't have a grounding on who we are. This is majorly influenced by Ngugi Wa Thiong'o, but He emphasizes that imperialism is still deep-seated in the African mind, and this is the reason Africa is still in the condition it is. It's not all bad, but it's bad. And breaking from the shackles of imperialism by, first of all, connecting with mother tongues, that is one of the ways that we can break from the chains of imperialism. Now, this is the reason I think the person that led to the inspiration of this video essay claimed that we are in utter poor condition as a whole because the other developed countries are far much better compared to what we have going on here. Imperialism has led the African mind to idealize the developed world, thinking that they have everything and we have nothing in comparison. This is what I think is wrong. This leads to most Africans, and particularly Kenyans, to have this kind of a typical dream of going abroad and securing a decent job, or it might not be decent, but as long as you are abroad in the US, UK, anywhere, name your, pick your flavor. This is what definition of success almost always is here in Africa, because imperialism has led us to think that heaven is out there, and it is very not where we are standing, and it is not in our mother culture and in our motherland. And this is a wrong way of thinking, and this is one of the things that have led me to write and produce this video essay, so that we can understand ourselves as Africans and appreciate the little things that we have, so that we can move forward as a consequence. You see, I'm not saying that you should not go to the US or UK, that if you find an opportunity to go there that you should automatically turn it down. I mean, like, come on. It's the US we are talking about, the most developed nation in the world, although it's a subjective opinion, and some might say like Japan and something like that. Pick your flavor. I'm not saying that you should not go to these countries whenever you find an opportunity. No, I'm saying that despising your condition as an African shouldn't be the reason to go to these developed countries. I do understand we have a lot of problems and very major problems going on here in Kenya and particularly in Africa. But this is not to mean that even the developed countries don't have their own problems going on. They have their own problems. It's just that they are different from what we have going on here. And the only way we can solve our problems here in Africa, and particularly Kenya, because I'm a Kenyan, is sticking around and building a better society for future generations, for our descendants. Because we can't continue living in a country that isn't at par with other countries in terms of progress. We need to stick around and solve our own problems, just like the developed countries stick around their homes to solve their own problems. Whether it's corruption, I know there are ways and steps to solve this corruption, and we are eventually going to figure out how to combat this giant of a problem, and we can't do that when everyone is running away from home. And as I said, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go there. I'm just saying that you should not run away from here going there, because even there are problems that you wouldn't even be able to cope up with as a foreigner. I hope you understand the point I'm trying to lay here. No society is perfect, and yes, they do have their own things going on there that are great and beautiful and everything. But we also have things going on here, and I hope this video essay will convince you otherwise, and be proud of your country and have a sense of patriotism in your own country, especially Kenyans. For us to understand what I'm about to explain, we need to understand the foundation of this mere language. I want to explain working upwards and combining the whole thing in conclusions. This is to make it more understandable and easy to digest. First, here in Kenya, we have two main languages that are familiar to almost everyone in the entire country. These two languages are the Swahili language, and the other one is the English language. The Swahili language is the national language, and the English language is the official language. These two languages are taught as compulsory subjects in the education system. So anyone who has gone through primary school and hopefully the high school is aware of these two languages, or at least they have enough amount of words to understand someone communicating in any of the two languages. Now, on the origin of these two languages, okay, let's start with the Swahili language. This language originated from the interactions of the Bantu people and the Arabs back 500 or to 1000 years ago. So it's about 500 AD and 1000 AD. That is where the Arabs and the Persian traders interacted with the Eastern African coast. After interacting with the Bantus, they facilitated the conjuring up of this language, which is the Swahili language. This means that the language itself borrows words from the combination of the Bantu languages that were involved, which I'll name them here, and on the other hand, the Arabs. There's a comparison here I want to make. I think Tanzanians are better at speaking Swahili than we Kenyans are. Even you see videos online of Kenyans confessing how much they envy the level of the Tanzanian Swahili. This is a completely normal reaction because the Tanzanian Swahili is the best version of any Swahili you will get anywhere in the whole of East Africa. Some parts of Kenya, especially Mombasa and Malindi, the coastal region, they also speak the pure Swahili. So this language somehow exists mostly in its purest form, exists mostly in the coastal region and almost all of Tanzania. The Tanzanians are the major speakers of the Swahili language. Where am I getting at? The English language, on the other hand, is made up of several languages, which include the Greek, which I hear a lot of words came from the Greek language, or Latin, or Norse, or Spanish. This is very important because I'll use it to make a point further in the video, which I think is very useful for understanding my point of view of making this video. The English language arrived in Kenya during the colonial period. It came with the British. That is not a mind-blowing fact. It's just known everywhere that wherever the British conquered, they used imperialism to instill their values through the English language to the colonized. There's not much to be said about the English language, despite that it's the most dominant language, whether it's first spoken or second language in a country. It's the most popular language in the world right now. Perhaps that's the reason I'm using it to make my videos. Now, we have observed two things. The English language is not of Kenyan origin, which is not a mind-blowing fact. The Swahili language, on the other hand, is not a language that would be called Kenyan. It should, in my opinion, be called a Tanzanian language, or a language of origin from the Eastern African coast. The fact that it doesn't exist only in Kenya, and yes, a lot of people know about it, but I'm more concerned about Kenya, and it is a fact that the Swahili language is more prevalent, is more advanced, and is mostly used. I mean, it's the official language of Tanzania. It's mostly used in Tanzania. We have to give it to them. That is two goals to one goal. So we have seen the most popular languages here in Kenya. These two languages are not things we would claim to be of Kenyan origin. We can't say that they are our own. So what is it do we have going on here is the major question. Well, worry not, I'm here to address that. Due to several factors that are in existence, we Kenyans have somehow found a way to combine these two languages, the Swahili and the English, to form one particular language, which I'm very inclined to call the Kenyanese language. Well, it might not sound like a lot, but trust me, in practice, there's something big going on here. Let's look at some examples so that we can analyze this language. Although I'm not a linguistic, but it is an observation that I have made, and I think it's somehow interesting to share it to the rest of the world, and then you can tell me maybe down in the comments what you think about this language, especially if you're a linguistic. The first example might not be one of the best examples in existence out there. In the course of a dialogue, you might find yourself saying to someone, now turudi back to what nilikuwa na try kukuexplain nia. In translation to English, now let's go back to what I was trying to explain to you. The example above, as you can see, is a mixture of these two languages. Not only individual words, but even one word is made from a combination of the two. A word like natrai. To understand that word, we have to know what is happening here. In direct Swahili translation, the word is najaribu. To English, it's trying. The verb here is try, and the Swahili translation of it is jaribu. So what is happening here is the combination of the na, which describes the persona who is doing the action, and the verb itself, which is try, to form a completely different word, or I might call it a verb, that is of a completely different language compared to Swahili and English. If that is not mind-blowing, then what is? Let's now look at another example and decipher it so that we can understand further much better. It's a bit complicated, but I hope you'll get the gist of what I'm trying to say. I'm not a linguistic, I'm just explaining something that I have observed. Now, this example is from a line from one of the major artists here in Kenya. So it's from the Kenyan music industry. There is a reason that I'll be deriving a line from the Kenyan music industry, a reason that I will explain later, but let's first look at this example. Kuwa na movie kwa lapini intimate, hatuwezi shikana kwa theater. In translation to English, this directly translates to having a movie on a laptop is intimate. We can't caress in a theater. Ignoring how true that line is, several things are happening in the line above. Let's analyze it for a second. Let's take apart the whole sentence into English and Swahili. So the English words at work here are movie, intimate, theater, and in Swahili, kuwa na kwa ni hatuwezi shikana kwa. Now, note that I haven't included the word lapi in the above example, and I'll make sure to explain why. This, my dear friends, is what most of the Kenyans are doing in their day-to-day activities and conversations. Some of us use a more complicated version of the language itself. It just depends on the level of sophistication or the level of exposure you have to both languages. Some of the famous people here whom I know use this language is, I guess, a favorite of everyone, the host of the Wicked edition on the national television, Dr. Kinori, and famous pastor and theologian Mr. T of the New Life Church in Nairobi. Now, if you can recall, I said something about explaining why I have taken a line from the music industry in example 2. This is because our musicians use this language, and it is a kind of esoteric language that can only be understood by East Africans, because if you know the English language and you don't know the Swahili part, you wouldn't understand the English parts. And if you knew the Swahili parts, you wouldn't understand the English parts. This is one of the reasons that our music industry doesn't hit globally, because it is somehow not to be understood by most people. I'm not saying that it's the reason that our music doesn't hit globally. I'm just saying that it is one of the reasons that it doesn't. There's a probability here that some of the Kenyans might disagree with the naming of this language. Last year, I shared this idea with a friend of mine who also happens to be my mom, and she went, "Isn't that what Sheng is?" In my opinion, Sheng is a language that changes words to a completely different language that is very esoteric and can only be understood by a minority of the people. Remember, we are talking about a Kenyan language. Okay, let's look at some of the examples of Sheng, and then we can continue with the explanation. Well, we have several examples like Mbulu means television, Ganya means bus, Lapi, laptop, Chorea, chill, Mode, teacher, Mao, mathematics, Tenje, phone, and so on and so on. You get the gist of the language itself. Now, not that this language is neither Swahili nor English. It's a completely different language. Furthermore, this is not a language that one would expect someone like PLO Lumumba or a random 80-year-old to understand. However, if I talked, for example, to Professor Lumumba or a random 80-year-old in Kenyanese, he or she would completely understand what I'm saying. The point is, Sheng is limited to a particular group of people, especially the urban youths in Nairobi and maybe Nakuru, while Kenyanese is a nationwide and age-neutral language. Remember, we are talking about a Kenyan language, not a Kenyan language for the youth. I personally use this language. I use it to kids, I use it to my fellow youths, and I use it to my parents, and I use it to 80-year-olds and very old people. And they can't help but to understand it because it's a language that is somehow easier to understand as a Kenyan. And the fact is, there is no chance of getting a negative reaction from possibly for from anyone from speaking with this language. In fact, the opposite is likely to happen. You are likely to impress people by level of your sophistication by using this language. However, on the other side, if you approach someone with the Sheng language, especially people who are not familiar with this language, and you assume that they know this language, they are more likely to have a negative reaction for assuming that they understand this language. See, the importance of language is about communicating and understanding each other throughout the conversation. It's about communicating ideas and sharing ideas to have an organized society. See, I'm not saying that Sheng is a bad language or it's a language that shouldn't exist. No, very not. I'm saying there is a difference between Kenyanese language, a very major difference between the Kenyanese language. I'm very inclined to call it that because, first of all, sounds nice, and second of all, it's very different from Sheng. Let's compare two sentences, maybe a sentence of an English sentence with the Swahili translation, the Kenyanese translation, and the Sheng translation, so that we can get a clear picture. Well, a simple sentence like, I want to buy a television. In the Swahili translation, ninataka kununua televisheni. That is the Swahili translation. The Kenyanese translation is nataka kubai TV, which TV is widely used as the short form of television. That is self-explanatory. The Sheng translation is nadai kushika mbulu. Did you note something there? In the Kenyanese version of the translation, it uses both the English and Swahili, a pure English and pure Swahili, and combines them to form a completely different language. But in Sheng, it makes a completely different word to mean a completely different thing. In the Kenyanese translation, it's a complete translation of both Swahili and English. I want translates directly to nataka in Swahili. The verb to buy translates directly to kubai in the following manner. Ku is a direct Swahili translation from the English word to, and instead of adding nunua, which translated to English is buy, we just combine the Swahili translation ku with the English translation buy to make one word kubai made up of the two languages. Nothing more, nothing less. And then there is TV, which is the short of television, self-explanatory. However, When we enter the Sheng realm, it's a completely different game. If taken literally, even though it sounds like pure Swahili, the sentence would translate directly to I want to catch Mbulu. Ignoring the fact that that doesn't make sense when translated into English, how many Kenyans would understand that one means television when saying Mbulu? And I repeat, this is not to condemn the Sheng language, but to consider the whole picture of us Kenyans as a whole, not partially, not the Kenyan urban youths. When it comes to things like mother tongue, I'm inclined not to get into details about the mother tongues, perhaps in another video. But since we are talking about languages, it's worth the while. It's worth mentioning about it. Well, there are more than 62 languages, local languages here in Kenya. That's something that explains about the diversity of Kenya. Most people from Kenya understand at least one mother tongue. Not that I have said most people, because not everyone is fluent in their mother tongues, especially youths from the urban that were raised in urban centers. And to replace the lack of a mother tongue, I suspect that is why the Sheng language came into existence, which is a brilliant work, I might add. The Sheng language is on another level. The only problem I have with the Sheng language is shoving it in everyone's face. It's the same case with the mother tongues. You can't assume that someone is from your respective tribe by first glance and somehow kind of strike a conversation with them. It's somehow rude to assume someone's ethnicity, uh, which is why I highly recommend the Kenyanese language, because it's a neutral language to be understood even by people from Garissa, from Taita Taveta, from Gusiland, from to Mandela, to Mount Elgon. People understand these things. The only thing that you have to do is just reduce the jargon. You don't go saying fundamental and existential crisis and entomology and epistemological to random people on the streets. No, you can use those in intellectual settings or people of your field. You understand my point. You just use a simplified version of the language itself, depending on the situation and the setting you are in. When you approach someone with the Kenyanese language, they are more than 90% likely to understand it, and there is somehow a way to navigate through the to know if someone is from your tribe, maybe by their name or by you hear them talking to another person that they know each other. You know they are from the same tribe, so you hear them talk about the same language, and then you chime in with to let them know that you are also from the same tribe. It's somehow of a social game. Well, this is not to say that our mother tongues are extremely irrelevant and that they shouldn't be used. No, in fact, it's the complete opposite. Like we had pointed a while ago about the views of Professor Ngugi Wa Thiong'o about languages and how it plays a major role in the identity of a person. I in fact think that these mother tongues should be introduced in schools so that we can become more grounded and we can ground our future generations more on who they are. We can connect them with the history of Kenya and our ancestors. And to be fair, I think every Kenyan should be somehow trilingual, so that, because you have to first know a mother tongue to ground yourself with reality and to connect yourself with your ancestors. And then on the other hand, you establish a kind of empowerment by learning maybe Swahili and English, so that you can understand most of people that are not from your tribe. And this is why I call it an empowerment, because by knowing Swahili, you'll come out from from the limited access of people from your mother tongue, and then you'll expand your horizon to East Africa through the Swahili. And Now you have somehow empowered yourself to connect with people from East Africa. And then to add to the empowerment is the English language, which is the most popular language in the world. And you'll be able to understand a great, if not all, parts of humanity, and you'll be able to connect with other cultures and other people that are foreign, that are not from your culture's origin, that are not from East Africa, but to the rest of the world. I'm not saying that you should stop there. You can move forward to learn Zulu, you can learn another local language. Like if you are Kikuyu, you can learn the Luo, the Taita, the Turkana, the Akamba. Pick your flavor. And yeah, so from people that are not Kenyans, I hope that you got a clear picture of what Kenya is like, and to make it more simpler, if you are from Europe or India or any part of any other part that is not from East Africa or Kenya, uh, I would like you to imagine that your mother tongue is Japanese, which is a very great language, and you somehow know Italian and Zulu. In my case, in the form of this video, you can equate them to English and Swahili, and you guys have somehow combined the Italian and Zulu to form a completely different language, which I have called the Kenyanese language, that is universally spoken in the entirety of your country. So, in my opinion, it's not like Kenya is crazy. And to add to the phrase that Kenya is crazy, we somehow go a step further and combine uh, the three languages that we embody, because most of us are trilingual. So you find yourself combining the Kikuyu, the English, and Swahili, especially when you are speaking to someone from your culture. This is something that I have observed. Most of my friends from my culture is the language that we use. So you sometimes overhear someone combining subconsciously three languages in one sentence as they are communicating, and it's not something that they do it on purpose. It's just subconsciously. Before we conclude everything, I would like to say that I once asked the AI that is the most popular, chat GPT, whether, because all of the Kenyanese language, most linguistics might call it code switching, which is changing one language from the other depending on the setting and who you are talking to and stuff like that. And I asked it whether code switching could be called a language, and it said no. Well, whether it's a language or not, I would like to acknowledge that it's a form of communication that exists in Kenya, and we should be proud of it. If you can recall, I said there was a reason I said I was explaining the origin of the English language and the Swahili language, about being the combination of Greek, Norse, and Spanish and Latin on the English side. And the Swahili side is the combination of the Bantu languages from East Africa and the Arabic language to form these languages. In my opinion, the Kenyanese language is the combination of the English language and the Swahili language. So if you can go a step further back, it's like the combination of the Bantu languages and the Arabic language and the Greek and those and Latin and Spanish of the English language to form a completely different language that exists here in Kenya. That is why I think, whether it's code switching or whatever you call it, it's something that has a history here in Kenya, and it exists subconsciously in our mind. Whether you call it a language or not, it's worth observing it and acknowledging its existence. And that was the whole purpose of this whole video. And I hope I have somehow convinced or opened a new way of looking at the Kenyan culture. And if you are a foreigner wanting to visit Kenya, we are English literate, but to connect more, you can learn a bit of Swahili, and that is all you need to do. Just learn a bit of Swahili, and then you're good to go in the Kenyan society to connect more with the people. And we will understand you, and we will find it interesting. So, all in all, thanks for watching this far, especially, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you.